Why living simply keeps you weak. Machiavelli. Living simply does not free you. It disarms you. The popular narrative frames simplicity as clarity restraint and moral superiority. It suggests that by reducing needs, expectations, and outward signals, one escapes competition and pressure. This story is appealing because it transforms withdrawal into virtue. It allows people to step back from social arenas without admitting retreat. But power does not interpret simplicity as wisdom. It interprets it as reduced leverage. Not because simplicity is wrong, but because simplicity applied at the wrong level removes the very signals through which influence is negotiated. Social systems do not read intentions. They read position. Visibility, optionality, and perceived capacity determine how others adjust around you. When someone simplifies by shrinking their surface area prematurely, they remove points of engagement that create tension and respect. They become easier to categorize, easier to ignore, easier to bypass. This is not punishment. It is mechanical. Systems allocate attention where friction exists. Where nothing presses back, nothing is accounted for. The mistake is not choosing less. The mistake is choosing less before position is secured. Strategic simplification happens after leverage is established, not before. When power simplifies, it concentrates. When weakness simplifies, it disappears. Both look identical from the outside, which is why the confusion persists. One is subtraction that sharpens force. The other is subtraction that erases presence. Society praises both equally because it cannot distinguish between restraint backed by capacity and restraint backed by lack. Those who simplify too early often believe they are opting out of status games. In reality, they are still inside the game, just playing without pieces. Others continue to signal, accumulate, and maneuver. The minimalist stands still believing stillness is neutrality. It is not. Stillness is read as consent to be positioned by others. By removing markers of ambition, reach, and readiness, they reduce the perceived cost of overlooking them. Over time, this becomes permanent. This has nothing to do with condemning modest living or elevating excess. The issue is level. Power operates vertically. Simplification at the wrong altitude collapses structure instead of refining it. Cutting signals before they have done their work is not discipline. It is self-removal from contention. And systems do not reward those who remove themselves quietly. They simply reallocate attention elsewhere. The uncomfortable truth is that leverage requires visible mass before it can be reduced. Only after weight is felt can lightness be respected. Without that sequence, simplicity is not strength. It is absence misnamed as virtue. Society protects the idea of simple living because it stabilizes those who would otherwise compete. The story is carefully framed. It says wanting less is enlightenment, that disengaging from status signals is freedom, that opting out places one above the struggle rather than beneath it. This narrative is not promoted by those at the top of hierarchies. It is circulated among those positioned safely away from leverage. It converts reduced reach into philosophical choice. In doing so, it prevents people from asking a more dangerous question. What influence did I give up when I simplified? The myth insists that renunciation is neutral, that stepping back does not change how one is treated, only how one feels. This is false. Social systems are comparative by design. When one actor reduces signals of capacity, others do not pause out of respect. They advance. Space vacated is never left empty. It is occupied immediately by those willing to project weight. Simplicity, when unbacked by authority, does not create moral altitude. It creates structural invisibility. What makes the story persuasive is that it borrows the language of strategy while removing its sequencing. It praises reduction without addressing timing. It celebrates lightness without asking whether mass was ever accumulated. Strategic simplification is an act of control. It occurs after dominance is established, when excess becomes unnecessary. Cultural simplicity is sold as the same act without the prerequisite. This confusion benefits the system. It convinces people to disarm voluntarily while believing they have chosen refinement. The myth also reassures by reframing loss as transcendence. If access declines, if invitations stop, if influence narrows, it is interpreted as alignment with values rather than consequence of positioning. This interpretation is comforting because it removes urgency. There is no pressure to rebuild leverage if the loss is reclassified as progress. The system remains undisturbed. Those who continue to signal power appear crude. Those who withdraw feel superior. The hierarchy remains intact. Importantly, this myth does not attack ambition directly. It redirects it inward. Instead of seeking reach, people seek purity. Instead of expanding capacity, they reduce desire. The struggle becomes internal rather than external. This shift is crucial. Internal struggles do not threaten structures. External ones do. By encouraging simplification as an identity, society ensures that many capable individuals turn their discipline against themselves instead of against limitation. The result is a quiet sorting. Those who simplify strategically are indistinguishable from a distance from those who simplified out of fatigue or fear. Only one group retains leverage. The other interprets marginalization as wisdom. The myth survives because it is never tested against outcomes, only against intentions. And systems, unlike stories, do not reward intention. They respond only to force visibility and the cost of ignoring someone who chose not to disappear. Human beings do not respond to simplicity as an ideal. They respond to it as a signal. At a basic level, people are not evaluating values when they observe others. They are assessing threat relevance and cost. Every social interaction contains a silent calculation. How much resistance does this person create? How much adjustment do they require? How expensive would it be to disregard them? Simplification alters this calculation immediately. When someone removes signals of capacity, optionality, or ambition, others do not interpret it as inner peace. They interpret it as lowered resistance. This reaction is not malicious. It is instinctive. Humans conserve energy by yielding only where pressure exists. Fear plays a central role here, not fear of danger, but fear of misjudgment. People fear aligning themselves below someone who later proves dominant. They fear dismissing someone who can impose cost. This fear keeps hierarchies fluid until signals stabilize. When a person simplifies too far too early, they reduce that uncertainty. They become readable. Readability eliminates fear. And when fear disappears, so does deference. What follows is not hostility, but casual positioning downward. Envy also adapts to simplicity. It does not vanish. It relocates. People do not envy those who appear unburdened. They envy those who appear capable of excess, but choose restraint. There is a crucial difference. Voluntary reduction backed by visible capacity provokes unease. Reduction backed by absence provokes indifference. Human nature does not reward lack. It rewards controlled abundance. This is why minimalism without power attracts praise but not protection. Praise is cheap. Protection is reserved for those who can retaliate. Self-interest completes the pattern. Individuals advance where friction is lowest. They collaborate upward, dominate sideways, and ignore downward. Simplification that removes social mass creates downward drift, regardless of intent. Others step over, speak for decide without consultation, not because they are cruel, but because nothing signals consequence. The simplified individual often notices this too late. By then, the new order feels natural to everyone else. Challenging it appears disruptive rather than corrective. This is the uncomfortable reality most narratives avoid. Humans do not organize themselves around virtue or authenticity. They organize around perceived leverage. Signals precede substance. Position precedes interpretation. When signals are voluntarily stripped away, human nature does not pause to admire discipline. It moves to fill the vacuum. Understanding this is not cynicism. It is literacy. Simplifying without accounting for how others actually respond is not enlightenment. It is misreading the species, and misreading human nature does not lead to freedom. It leads to being calmly, quietly, and permanently placed where no leverage is required to manage you. Darkness is not excess. Darkness is control over reduction. The mistake most people make is assuming that stripping down automatically signals strength. It does not. Strength is not communicated by absence alone, but by what absence replaces. A dark position does not simplify to appear virtuous or detached. It simplifies to remove noise while preserving pressure. Nothing essential is surrendered. Nothing that generates hesitation in others is discarded. Reduction is applied surgically, not ideologically. A dark personality understands that simplicity is dangerous when it exposes needlessness rather than choice. When people sense that you live with less because you must, simplicity weakens you. When they sense you live with less because you can afford to, simplicity sharpens you. The distinction is never explained, it is inferred. Darkness never clarifies motive. It allows others to assume capacity remains intact beneath restraint. This assumption is what maintains leverage even in minimal form. Strategic reduction also requires emotional non-reactivity. The dark individual does not seek validation for living simply. They do not broadcast restraint as identity. They do not invite praise for discipline. Doing so would convert simplicity into performance, which reintroduces dependence on perception. True control eliminates the need to be understood. Others are left to reconcile visible restraint with the unresolved question of what has been withheld. That unresolved tension is where power resides. Self-cutting position looks similar on the surface, but feels different in interaction. The person explains their choices. They justify opting out. They emphasize contentment. These signal this collapse ambiguity. They reassure the environment that no hidden capacity exists. Once reassured, others relax around them. Relaxation is fatal to leverage. People only adjust upward when uncertainty remains. Darkness preserves uncertainty deliberately. This is why dark simplicity is rare. It requires the ability to hold weight without displaying it, to reduce without signaling loss, to withdraw without apologizing. Most cannot do this because they still seek social equilibrium. They want their reduction to be approved, admired, or morally validated. Darkness rejects approval entirely. It accepts misinterpretation as the cost of control. Simplifying from darkness is not about peace. It is about concentration. Every removed element increases density elsewhere. Attention authority and optionality are not diluted across many signals. They are compressed. When interaction occurs, it carries disproportionate impact. Few words matter more. Rare presence weighs heavier. This is reduction that intensifies force rather than dissolving it. Without darkness, simplicity becomes confession. With darkness, simplicity becomes concealment. One gives away position. The other protects it. The surface looks identical. The outcomes never are. Power mechanics reveal the difference immediately because systems reward leverage, not intention. In work, those who live simply often reduce signals that justify inclusion in decision-making. They decline visibility, minimize ambition, and disengage from resource competition. Believing competence will speak later. It does not. Decisions are made where pressure exists, not where restraint is admired. When someone removes themselves from the contest for budget authority or expansion, the system does not interpret this as integrity. It interprets it as availability for use. Responsibility flows downward, influence flows upward. The simplified individual becomes reliable labor rather than strategic mass. Money operates with the same indifference. Capital responds to trajectory, not contentment. When someone presents a reduced lifestyle without retained optionality, they signal limited upside. This lowers urgency around them. Opportunities are routed elsewhere, not out of cruelty but efficiency. Power invests where expansion is visible, even if unused. Strategic reduction happens after accumulation, when capital is already assured. Premature reduction convinces the system that accumulation is no longer a priority, and systems do not chase those who signal withdrawal. In relationships, the mechanics are even more unforgiving. Simplifying one's desires, needs, or expectations too aggressively removes tension. Tension is what creates polarity. When one person signals they require little, they are given little. When they signal they are satisfied with minimal investment becomes standard. This is not emotional punishment, it is equilibrium. The person who reduces their leverage emotionally becomes the one who adapts. The other sets terms without noticing they are doing so. Across these domains, the pattern is identical. Strategic simplification consolidates leverage before reducing expression. Self-cutting simplification removes expression before leverage exists. One produces gravity, the other produces convenience. Power is never convenient. Convenience is reserved for those who can be managed without cost. What confuses most observers is that systems rarely announce these shifts. There is no rejection letter stating that simplicity lowered rank. There is only gradual exclusion, fewer invitations, less consultation, narrower margins. By the time the simplified individual notices the structure has already adapted around their reduced footprint. Reassertion feels disruptive, even inappropriate, because the new equilibrium has been accepted by everyone else. Real-world power mechanics are not hostile to simplicity. They are hostile to unarmed simplicity. Reduction without retained force is interpreted as surrender regardless of values. Systems reward those who can simplify because they no longer need to prove mass. They ignore those who simplify because they never established it. This is the final distinction. Simplifying after leverage compresses power. Simplifying before leverage cancels it. The actions may look identical. The mechanics never are. People who are described as good adopt simple living as a signal of virtue and are surprised when it produces strategic loss. They assume that reducing visible desire will make them harder to exploit, that modesty will inspire respect, that not competing openly will protect them from aggression. Instead, it removes the friction that prevented them from being repositioned downward. The error is not ethical, it is mechanical. They behave as if systems reward restraint. Systems reward pressure. When pressure disappears, so does consideration. Good people simplify to avoid corruption, but they misunderstand where corruption actually enters. It does not enter through possessions or ambition. It enters through dependence. By lowering their requirements publicly, they increase reliance on others' goodwill. They make themselves easier to satisfy, which makes them easier to manage. This is why they are trusted, but rarely deferred to. Trust is extended to those who cannot impose cost. Deference is reserved for those who can. They also mistake reduced visibility for safety. By stepping back from signaling they believe, they are avoiding scrutiny and conflict. In reality, they are avoiding relevance. Power does not attack what poses no obstacle. It reallocates around it. The good person interprets this absence of conflict as success, unaware that decisions are simply being made elsewhere. When outcomes arrive already settled, they feel excluded rather than defeated, unable to identify the moment position was lost. Another critical mistake is equating internal satisfaction with external stability. Feeling content does not protect position. Systems do not measure fulfillment. They measure force and fallback options. When someone simplifies without maintaining visible alternatives, they remove the system's incentive to negotiate with them. There is no urgency to accommodate someone who appears adaptable to less. Adaptability in power terms reads as infinite elasticity. Elastic objects are stretched. Good people also cling to the belief that clarity will correct misinterpretation. When simplification leads to marginalization, they explain their values, their choices, their lack of interest in excess. This explanation finalizes the downgrade. It reassures others that nothing strategic is being withheld. Once reassured, the system relaxes permanently. The ceiling lowers quietly. From that point on, advancement feels unnatural, even unwelcome. They do not lose because they choose simplicity. They lose because they choose simplicity without insulation. They disarm themselves socially and then expect to be treated as if armed restraint were still present. Power does not honor that expectation. It responds to what is enforceable, not what is admirable. The tragedy is not that good people are punished. They are not. They are simply placed. And placement once normalized is rarely reversed. By the time the cost of premature simplification becomes visible, the structure has already absorbed their absence and redistributed weight elsewhere. Machiavelli does not argue against simplicity. He dismantles the illusion that renunciation equals strength. His framework is unforgiving because it refuses to confuse inner discipline with external power. To Machiavelli, reduction is never virtuous on its own. It is only meaningful when it follows consolidation. He observes that those who abandon tools before securing position do not appear noble. They appear exposed. Power, in his view, is not corrupted by possession. It is weakened by premature restraint. The prince who disarms to prove purity invites conquest, not respect. Within the Machiavellian frame, simplicity is a privilege of those who have already made themselves costly to ignore. Only after authority is unquestioned can excess be discarded without consequence. At that stage, reduction reads as confidence. Before that stage, it reads as limitation. Machiavelli is clear on this point, even if readers resist it. Appearances govern outcomes, not appearances of virtue, but appearances of capacity. A ruler who lives plainly but commands force is feared. One who lives plainly because force was never built is dismissed. This is where modern narratives misapply his thinking. They borrow the aesthetic of restraint without the infrastructure of power. They praise leaders who appear modest without asking what leverage protects that modesty. Machiavelli would call this naive imitation. He warns repeatedly that copying the surface behavior of the powerful without reproducing their foundation leads to ruin. What looks like humility at the top is often strategic concealment. What looks like humility at the bottom is submission mistaken for choice. The Machiavellian frame also rejects the idea that intention redeems consequence. Choosing less for moral reasons does not prevent loss of influence. Power does not negotiate with values. It negotiates with force, alliance, and consequence. A system does not pause to respect one's decision to step back. It reallocates. Machiavelli does not condemn this. He accepts it as reality and builds from there. Most importantly, Machiavelli separates control from comfort. Simplifying life may increase personal comfort, but it often reduces strategic control. He would never confuse the two. Comfort is private. Control is relational. The error is believing one can trade the latter for the former without being repositioned. History in his analysis is a record of those who attempted exactly that and were replaced by less scrupulous actors who understood timing. In the Machiavellian frame, simplicity is not rejected. It is delayed. It is used as compression, not abdication. Those who simplify after power signal that they no longer need to prove reach. Those who simplify before power announce that they never had it. The distinction is brutal, unemotional, and decisive. This is why Machiavelli remains uncomfortable. He does not offer moral shelter. He offers clarity, and clarity makes it impossible to pretend that living simply is neutral in a world that measures strength by who can afford to reduce without disappearing. The inverse danger is subtle and terminal simplifying. Without the capacity to endure the consequences destroys position faster than excess ever could. Partial simplification creates exposure without insulation. People reduce signals, withdraw ambition, lower demands, yet internally still expect recognition. Protection and leverage to remain intact. This contradiction collapses quickly. Systems punish inconsistency. When outward reduction is not backed by inward acceptance of diminished influence, tension emerges. The individual feels overlooked, undervalued, bypassed. They attempt to correct this emotionally rather than structurally. Each correction confirms the downgrade. Those who cannot endure the social silence that follows premature simplification begin to explain themselves. They clarify intentions. They emphasize values. They justify absence. This is the critical failure. Explanation converts restraint into confession. It tells the environment there is nothing hidden, nothing withheld, nothing that would impose cost if ignored. Once that certainty is established, the hierarchy hardens. Doors do not reopen. They simply stop being considered. The majority fail here because they apply simplicity aesthetically rather than strategically. They like the image of reduction but cannot tolerate its implications. They want the moral credit of restraint without paying the positional price. This produces instability. Others sense it immediately. The simplicity feels fragile, defensive, reactive. It does not create gravity. It creates pity or indifference. Both are fatal to leverage. There is also an internal collapse few anticipate. When social feedback diminishes, many interpret it as proof that the system is shallow or corrupt. This rationalization protects the ego but locks the position. Instead of rebuilding leverage, they double down on reduction, reframing loss as enlightenment. What they call freedom is often inability to re-enter contention without pain. The choice hardens into identity because reversing it would require admitting strategic error. Dark simplification requires isolation tolerance. It requires the ability to be misread without correction, excluded without protest, and undervalued without reaction. Most cannot sustain this state. They need confirmation that their restraint is noticed and respected. Power offers no such confirmation. It rewards endurance silently and penalizes fragility without announcement. This is why simplicity is not for the unprepared. It is not gentle. It does not protect. It removes buffers. Without prior consolidation of leverage, it exposes dependency rather than independence. Those who attempt it without the capacity to stand alone discover too late that reduction is irreversible once the structure has adapted. The warning is not moral. It is mechanical. Simplify only when position is secure enough to survive being underestimated indefinitely. Otherwise, what appears as clarity becomes erasure. And erasure, once normalized, does not provoke opposition. It simply becomes the new order, quiet, stable, and permanently outside your control. At this point, no correction is being offered. Only a placement is occurring. The reader is now positioned between two interpretations of their own restraint. One is comforting. It says simplification was a choice. That withdrawal signaled independence, that reduced engagement reflects clarity rather than loss. The other is colder. It suggests that reduction may have been premature, that leverage was surrendered before it was secured, that what felt like freedom may have been reclassification. Neither interpretation is enforced. The structure does not argue. It simply reflects outcomes back over time. What becomes difficult to ignore is how often simplification coincides with decreased negotiation. Fewer questions asked, fewer accommodations made, less resistance encountered when decisions move past without consultation. This does not arrive as punishment. It arrives as normalization. People adjust to the reduced footprint without hostility. They assume less must be required because less has been signaled. The environment does not feel antagonistic. It feels settled. That settlement is the signal. Here, the reader is not asked to reverse anything or adopt a new posture. That would be instruction. Instead, the reader is left with a quiet distinction that cannot be unseen. Strategic reduction leaves behind tension. Self-cutting reduction dissolves it. One creates unease in others. The other creates ease. Ease is not respect. Ease is management without cost. What remains is an internal alignment problem. To continue simplifying without leverage requires accepting permanent interpretive loss. Others will define meaning. Motives will be assumed. Capacity will be underestimated. There will be no urgency to correct this because correction would require reintroducing mass. To reintroduce mass would contradict the identity built around reduction. Most people choose identity over position without realizing it. The alternative is not described as better. It is described as heavier. It involves tolerating signals one may no longer enjoy sending. It involves allowing friction back into interactions. It involves accepting that simplicity may need to be delayed, not abandoned. This alternative offers no moral elevation, only structural consequence. The reader now understands that simplicity is not a binary of good or bad, pure or corrupt. It is a timing question, disguised as a lifestyle. When applied after leverage, it concentrates authority. When applied before leverage, it resolves the system's uncertainty about where to place you. Nothing more needs to be resolved externally. The structure will continue responding as it always has. What remains unresolved is internal, whether to remain comfortable inside a reduced position or to accept the discomfort required to rebuild mass before reducing again. No guidance is given because none is necessary. The distinction has already done its work. From this point forward, every act of simplification will register differently. Not morally, structurally. And the reader will feel the difference long before anyone ever names it aloud. Power does not punish simplicity, it finishes sorting it. There is no dramatic collapse when leverage is cut too early. There is no confrontation, no explicit loss. What happens instead is quieter. The environment stops orienting itself around you. Your reduction becomes assumed, then expected, then invisible. Others no longer test your boundaries because there is no uncertainty left to test. You are understood. And being fully understood in power terms is terminal. At the end of this process, simplicity remains, but choice disappears. What once felt like discipline hardens into constraint. The system adapts perfectly to your lowered demands. It gives you exactly what you have proven you can accept. Nothing more is withheld because nothing more is required. From the outside, it looks peaceful. From the inside, it feels static. That stasis is not serenity. It is completion. Those who simplified after consolidating leverage experience a different ending. Their reduction never becomes expectation. It remains optional. Their absence creates friction. Their minimalism unsettles rather than reassures. When they disengage, gaps appear. When they reappear, adjustments are made. Their simplicity does not resolve the system's uncertainty about them. It preserves it. That uncertainty is why their position survives reduction intact. The difference between these two endings is never announced. It reveals itself over time through who must reintroduce weight and who never needs to. One group eventually has to signal again, explain again, push again, just to regain basic consideration. The other never does. Their silence is already accounted for. Their restraint is already priced in. This is the final cold truth. Living simply is not weak. Living simply at the wrong moment is. The system does not care about coherence, peace, or values. It only records what pressure remains when signals are removed. If nothing remains, placement is finalized. There is no recovery arc written into this. Structures do not apologize. They do not reverse gently. They respond only to renewed mass, renewed friction, renewed cost. Most people never reintroduce these once they have simplified into identity. They call it freedom and adapt to the ceiling that follows. And so the ending is not dramatic. It is efficient. Some reduce and become lighter while remaining dangerous. Others reduce and become lighter until they are no longer felt at all. Both live simply. Only one remains structurally relevant. The system does not judge which you are. It does not need to. It already adjusted.